Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this special meeting of the Town of Richmond Select Board, this being Tuesday, January 7th, 2025. Because it's Tuesday, I am on call and I don't see our vice chair here. So if you guys hear a beeping noise, you can fight over who takes over while I answer the phone. Before we begin, would anybody care to make a public comment? Okay, moving into our warned agenda. Josh, board, any additions or deletions to tonight's agenda?
Really one, right?
Yeah. So jumping in, a review of the draft fiscal year 26 budget, including all departments and revenue. Who wants to start?
Can you give an overview of what we have and changes since last time? Okay. There you go. Oops.
And you have your color coding.
Yep, I can go over that. Okay. Okay, so that's a little better. Okay, so since Barb mentioned the color coding, I'll start there. Any cells shaded in blue or highlighted in blue are changes since the last select board meeting, since the last time we reviewed this. The salmon colors are workspaces where we can consider changes to the budget, as we've been doing the last couple of meetings, as we've been trying to make a few changes. So this budget, we kept the staffing flat, as we discussed last year in each department. So by flat, we mean same number of employees, same number of hours those employees are working. That's in admin and in police. We also did that for library. We sat down with Suzanne and Lori and went through things, and there's a 12-hour per week administrative position that was in the last iteration that we took out for this. So that keeps their staffing number and hours the same in the budget for FY26 as it is budgeted for FY25.
Jay?
As we discussed last night, the library budget is kind of interesting because it's really the trustees at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Do the trustees think they could find a revenue stream for that, or is it just up to us?
The taxpayer.
That's a good question.
Yeah,
for
I mean,
Lori.
well, yeah, but well, unless they know about a grant, but yeah, Lori's got her hand up.
Jump in.
Laurie, go ahead.
Okay, so we do not, to answer that question, we do not have another revenue source for that position. However, I don't think that, I want to make it clear why we put that position in there. And I don't know that we've ever had a chance to really talk about that. So with your permission, I'm gonna kind of read what Suzanne and I put together.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so this position was based on a recommendation from Rebecca before she left as the library director. There are three reasons why we want to add this position. The primary reason, in my view, is for the safety of the staff and patrons, plus the inability to get substitutes when we have a need for that when someone's out sick. And I think third in the priority list is also the expanding services of the library. We've been trying to maintain a full 3-person schedule for all open hours to enable us to run programs without leaving one staff member to operate the library alone. This is especially important when we're trying to equitably provide service to patrons who can't make it to the library during the weekday. This, I think we've already discussed this, we've had difficulty finding last-minute substitutes, even though we have a substitute person on call. She really only responds to like scheduled substitute times. And even then, she's been not able to respond to many of those requests. When we have only 2 scheduled people on, and this 12-hour person fills out the places where we do only have 2 people on staff. I feel like it's a safety concern, particularly when somebody calls out sick and you have one person managing that whole building. And trying to do the walk around at the end when the building is going to shut down. So the times when this person is going to fill in are the times when we only have 2 staff. That is Saturday morning, Wednesday afternoon, and Tuesday morning. These are times where if one person is doing programs, there's one person operating the building. The trustees are concerned about the recent increase in crime and also the response time. Should we have to call the police? And if there's one person in that entire building who is feeling unsafe, that's problematic for the trustees. In addition, our services have expanded. We're back to or over our pre-COVID annual visits of 30,000. We have program attendance of 45,000. And the physical circulation numbers are about the same at pre-COVID, but digital circulation and henceforth the number of calls to the library where staff has to spend time on the phone helping somebody with the digital circulation, that's up like dramatically. Suzanne just finished the count that we're required to submit to the state that showed that we had 380 non-library meetings and events in the building in 2024. And if those are existing groups, then we don't need a lot of staff support time. But if it's a new group coming in, there's a walkthrough and a contract that the group has to sign and questions, and often a staff person has to provide extra support to those groups that are using it. The rental fees right now, I think, are around $10,000 that are going back to the town center fund, I believe, from the library's rental of that room. And the problem, of course, is that it's not free. There is staff support needed every time we rent that room, unless it's a regular user like the senior center. So I think in my view, I think it's the safety of staff and patrons in a building that is very large with lots of places to hide. And we've seen other libraries are having increasing security issues around the state, particularly Fletcher Free, but others as well. So that's really the rationale why we wanted to add this 12-hour-a-week person to fill in those gaps in service and make sure that everyone is safe, especially Wednesday night. I have to say that's been the most concerning of all the time frames, because there's no one in the town center building at that time when the library's open till 8 o'clock.
So I am sensitive to this, both the content here and the role of the trustees. So let me understand, did you take the position out and should we put it back in? Is that the sort of discussion point?
Adding it back.
We did not take it out. Josh took it out.
Right, so we took it out because when we looked at the budget the last time, we kept the staffing flat, but we discussed that we kept the library staffing increase in. So in this iteration, based on the guidance from the board, we said, okay, we'll just keep everything 100% flat, sort of baseline the conversation for all departments.
Well, so I have a thought. I think, because we talked about this last night, the role of the trustees. It would seem to me that if the trustees feel strongly about what the budget should be, maybe what we should do is just put it in as they propose it and be clear in the town report and elsewhere that this is the trustees' proposal. And my thinking is if the trustees have authority and responsibility, we should be clear they have authority and responsibility, not the select board, if that makes sense.
Jay?
I agree with what Barb just said. I want to stipulate before I start that I am biased. I've worked at 3 different libraries. My mother was a library director. Yeah. I worked in a public library. My mom ran the Blacksburg, Virginia library for like 30 years. So I know what it's like to be alone in a building at night. And I think we're actually very fortunate that we have not had somebody decide to stay lurking in the building and assault somebody after hours. I think Lori makes an excellent point about safety. The other point I think that Lori has made that's very well taken is right now, the person that is theoretically their on-call sub is not performing in that role as they're expected to. They only show up when it's, as she said, scheduled absences. So if somebody has the plague, whoever is supposed to work with them that day is working by themselves because that person's not coming in. And I don't think it's fair to the staff or to the people who use the library to have a choice between, well, you can work solo or we can close the library, but this sub's not coming in. I think 12 hours for 13,509 is reasonable to be able to have that coverage in the time she talked about, and in order to have somebody to actually be a sub when they need one.
I'm just wrestling. Does it even matter what you think?
Yeah, I don't know if it does. At the end of the day, I think if the trustees think, to your point, if the trustees think this is reasonable, then I say, well, okay. But I think they have made a good case for it if you wanted to take it to that point.
And my view is I think they have the authority and responsibility. And my point is, I think we should just be clear that it's their proposal to the voters, not our proposal to the voters. And if I understand the law or the statute and the rule of the trustees, our opinion is that of voters as opposed to select board members. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yes. I mean, the trustees are sensitive to the fact that we have a problem this year with the budget, and we want to be good stewards of the public's money. But I feel pretty strongly that it's unfair to the staff not to do this. We put the whole safety and security on our next agenda because there are other issues beyond just this one position that need to be addressed. I'm fine with making it clear in the town report that this is the budget recommended by the trustees, because that is in reality what happens. So I don't know if Suzanne, do you want to weigh in? I don't know if anybody else, any of the other trustees are on the call.
I think Matt's here, but
Yeah.
I also am here.
Yep. Hi. Hi, Raphael. Yep. That all sounds correct. There's one note. Lori had a decimal point reading wrong. So it's not, we didn't have, just for the public recording of this, we didn't have 45,000 people at our programs. We had 4,500. In case anyone is reading that later. But yes, I think, as Lori said, we're having a bigger conversation about security at the library. And our meeting is, the library's trustees meeting is next week. And I think that the town center has been having some similar, the town admin office has been having some similar conversations, but that's really at the forefront of our minds right now.
So first I'll share a story. I had reason to go into City Hall in Burlington in the last couple of months, and literally there was nobody home.
Right.
Everybody there was behind bulletproof glass. I could not find a live body on 3 floors at City Hall Park. And clearly it's associated with both, virtual workplace, but also safety. Like there's bulletproof glass in front of every workspace, which is locked and only accessible by keys and codes. It feels like a different city. So that's just a story about crime. If we're going to put the library budget to bed, what would we do to the
tax rate?
The table? Well, I'm just thinking the table in front of us.
Okay.
Well, for tonight, we would put 13,509 into there. And then we would, for the final presentation, we would allocate that back up to these 3 lines here for salaries, social security, and childcare. But that gives a bottom line of $373 and $6.
Jay?
Okay, so to follow up, I mean, I wholly agree. If we're going to point the finger at the library board and say it's the trustees and say it's their budget, but it's being voted currently as part of the overall town budget.
Mhm.
Do we want to, as we discussed last night, split that budget off and present it to the voters individually?
So Adam, I think, had mentioned we should bring this up when these folks are here and they may not be able to answer it without addressing it among the trustees as a whole. But to be clear, the question that came up at our meeting last night is if we're going to treat the library budget under the authority of the trustees as the trustees' authority, responsibility, relatively autonomous, should we split it out as a separate article for voting by the voters? And there are examples of that in some other towns where they break out different things. So that was a question that you might want to consider given the unique role. And an example, the only closest example, and it's fairly different, is the water sewer budget, which is managed by the Water Sewer Commission, not by the Select Board. And so that's voted separately by the users. And so has some vague similarities, but is different, of course.
I have some, well, while theoretically I understand that, my practical concern is that there's already going to be so many individual things on this ballot to vote on, and each one of them is going to increase the tax rate. If it's the conservation fund, it's all the charitable donations. Now we're adding the library, and we're adding Australian ballot on the town budget and the school budget. I don't know. It already feels very confusing to the taxpayer and rife for complaints when all these things you're voting on a town budget and then we're adding all this other money into the budget as they vote yes or no. I'm not sure if I'm being clear, but
No, Mr. Chairman, I agree with what she's saying.
Yeah.
I am becoming more inclined to say, why are we doing charitable donations for non-liberal services anyway? The ones that we want to be, that we consider absolutely essential, we moved into the budget proper. And these small to begin with, voters could donate to them on their own if they wanted to. And it would make
100%, Jay. As a
The short
taxpayer, yeah.
That's what our policy that we adopted as the Select Board says.
right.
And all of those nonprofits submit proposals to us, and this is what we described we would do.
Oh, absolutely.
So in my opinion, we could contemplate a different approach next year, but
I'm not saying this year. I'm just saying voters have said, why are we doing this in the first place? I think they may have a point. If next year we decide and the voters indicate that they would just as soon leave this out of the budget, then that would make it easier for the library board budget next year to be. This year, I agree with Lori, it would be overwhelming, I think, to a lot of the voters. And some of them will start voting no for everything.
One thought, as Lori brought up, the staff person's integral in helping out with the community room, and that does not go without staff when somebody rents the community room. Before, I think we get $10,000 roughly about that. I think we made a motion a while ago that goes directly into the town center fund. Should a percentage of that go back in as revenue as an offset for staffing costs that are part of the cost of doing business when we have community events? Because right now it's not on the revenue side, right? It goes directly in. It used to be a revenue thing.
It was the library that made the decision to have it go to the town center fund because the town center fund is now paying for the maintenance.
Well, yeah, I mean, so there's an up and
Trade-offs.
down there, but I was just thinking
Big
as a part
trade-off.
of.
I mean,
well, arguably, the point that was made here, though, was tonight that the cost of if I understand correctly, the cost of having those events is partly staffing. That you have to be there, you have to make sure people come in, that they leave, you have to set it up, clean up. Does that seem accurate?
No, that's not exactly right. It's when somebody comes in for the first time, they get a tour. They walk them through the contract that they're signing, but staff does not have to be there when the people are actually in the building.
Right.
So-
And that's
They
actually,
sometimes are.
Sorry, Lori. That's actually, this is Suzanne again. That's part of why we have to spend that time doing the walkthrough with them, because we have we set a temporary code that people can so people can access the building for their event after hours. So staff is not. Oop, sorry. No, okay. And we also do we collect payment from everyone. So we do some bookkeeping on that as well. I'm hearing someone talking.
Well, so where I was going is I was thinking if there was a quid pro quo in exchange for doing these rentals or events, there's more staff time, that there was a logic there for using the revenue to pay for the staff time. But if that's not as clear, it just seems like an arbitrary choice.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be clear. So when there's an event at night, it's not a town committee. It's not for the town. It's another event renting a space. A non-employee, non-committee member is responsible for locking up the building? Kind of goes against the safety.
They're essentially responsible for closing the door. So they have a temporary access code to get into the building. And then the door itself stays locked, so they just have to push it closed when they leave. All of the library materials, all of our computers and stuff are in rooms that have locked doors. So it's essentially a corridor from the main entrance up to the community room on the second floor, where they only have access to that room essentially, and the little public room on the third floor, and the two bathrooms on the second floor. So none of the rooms where we have our materials or computers or patron information, all of those are locked.
I'm thinking more of somebody sneaking in while the event is going on and hiding, and you guys got a surprise in the morning.
Yep, and that is one thing we're talking about next week at our meeting.
I don't know a solution for that, but
I will only say the library that I worked at would not allow anybody there without a staff person. A staff person was always the last person to leave. But to be fair, that was a much larger library with more patrons.
I will say there, although the money is going to the town center fund, the number of events that they are getting rent for those rooms has definitely increased. So whether it's going here or there, it's almost covering the cost of what we're looking at for the 12-hour position.
Patty, go ahead.
Have you had any bad experiences? I mean, I know that my family rented that space before, and it feels pretty local and safe. Have you had bad experiences? I mean, we're talking a lot of safety. I feel like it might be because we're trying to justify where money is going to be coming from. So I just want to be clear. Have we had bad experiences renting out that room?
Suzanne, I don't know if we have
Yeah.
not had experiences renting out the room. We have had to call the police because of a patron behavior problem.
But
Yeah.
not because of renting a room. It's just because a patron came in and they were being unreasonable.
Yeah, that was during open hours. So we haven't, to my knowledge, recently at least, had after hours issues in the building with these rentals.
It sounds like the security issue is a separate issue that you'll be handling at the next trustees meeting, but for purposes tonight, we have put the 13 back in. Is there anything else budget related that we should talk about tonight with the library funds?
I have a thought.
Who said
June-
that?
June did.
Okay, June, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to have you think about considering that rental income going back in and offsetting the budget as revenue, just because it is library revenue, and you've just established that the library is a separate entity. They create their own budget with their board of trustees. So it seems to me it would make sense that that would be library revenue to offset the expenses instead of the town center fund.
I would disagree because we have town center rent money coming in that's going to the library, and I think that was the premise. This change happened when that happened.
Yeah, I think the library, that money used to go to the general operating fund of the town, which was not necessarily going to any benefit of the library building. And because all of the other town rentals, the post office and the little bit of money that's coming in from other rentals is going into the town center fund to maintain the building. And we have been using money from the town center fund for building maintenance in the library. It didn't make sense for it to go into the just general operating budget. And I think that's why the change was made a few years ago.
So all rental income right now is going into the town center fund,
Correct,
and all
Or ta-
repairs are coming out of that.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we've put the
Well,
decision.
I'm sorry, that's not entirely correct. Repairs to the main building are, the library. We had a question about this in a previous meeting. The library reserve line, in this budget, which was cut for this year, is for our, like, essentially the internal, part of the building. And then the town center fund is what's used for, the mechanical systems and the exterior of the building. Whereas if we have to replace, flooring, or if we, a sink or something like that, that's us, that's the library. That's out of our maintenance budget.
Bart?
So, yeah, this was, 10 or 15 years ago, it was kind of vague, and then there was an agreement reached, a sort of memo of understanding. Josh, what was the rough year? Is that like 5, 6 years ago, something like that?
Yeah, I think more like 3 or 4, but.
So that was just to clarify what the town is responsible for versus what the library is responsible for. And I think that's an accurate description, of course, is that it's a split. And there have been some big items and some future big items like roofing repairs potentially. But it is a split between the two. And from where I sit personally, the 10,000, I could argue it either way. I don't have a strong opinion.
So for purposes of the budget, what should we be looking at next with the library?
I think that was the
That's it.
biggest change or only change that we've made since the trustees presented the budget to the board.
So if we add that back in and maybe look at the bottom line, because it's about flat then, isn't it?
Pretty close.
I think it's a discussion to be had over the next year about the degree to which, well, we need to respect the autonomy of the library trustees. That's pretty obvious.
And your question is, in the future, should we contemplate an article that's more clearly independent or recognizes the authority and responsibility? I would also add, it is a little different than the Water Sewer Commission or the Water Sewer Department, because that department makes payments to the town to offset like business services, payroll, insurance, a whole bunch of stuff, beyond health insurance, liability insurance. And I only point that out because it's true, and that it's also, they are different, that, and I'm not suggesting we have to build those costs into this or any future library budget, but just to point out that that is the closest thing to the library in it, but it is fully independent.
Laurie, anything else on library?
I don't think so. Suzanne or any of the other trustees?
Not at this
Aye.
time.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. On to fire department.
That's where you want to go next.
They're here.
Sure. So, I can kind of summarize a couple of the changes. So Tanya and I looked at the capital
Is there
plan.
still a hand up?
That's Laurie.
Lori, is your hand still up or is that left over? I think it might be. She had it up the entire time,
Left
so I
over.
think she just left it up. So we took another look at the fire department capital plan and made a few changes, which then we made some changes to the deposit to the reserve, which is here. So after discussion last time, we looked at the fire engines and said, okay, we've got engine one, which is budgeted for purchase in FY 30 and 31 for a total of $550,000. We might be able to remove that due to the addition of the water tank on the new rescue truck. I think it is, prudent to do some more examination of that and see where we might want to go there. But if we remove that, then we wouldn't have to contribute some money this year or in FY 26 to go towards that. We eliminated in the capital plan $10,000 for an outbuilding, which was budgeted in FY 26 that Jerry said we could probably do without in 26. In the capital plan, we added $30,000 of fire department impact fees to pay for a portion of the $45,000 roof replacement. One note on that as we were reviewing the guidance, it seems like there's some conflicting information. There's a statute on impact fees, and there's also an ordinance that we have from Richmond. It's 20 years old on impact fees. And it looks like you can use it for new construction. It seems a bit vague, and if you can use it for like a larger replacement of a roof, like it seems clear you couldn't use it for like minor maintenance items. So I think we probably have to do a little bit more due diligence on that. But we're thinking that impact fees, if they couldn't be used for that, might be able to be used towards a purchase of a fire truck, for instance, something like that. So for the purposes of this budget, we've included it as a way to get some money from non-tax revenues. We also reviewed the cost of the rescue truck, and as we went over that contract in a little bit more detail, in the capital plan, we had it at $595,200. The actual price is $589,46, and that's due to some discounts and some things that we had. So we factored that in about a $6,000 savings. So what that does is initially we looked at the fire department capital reserve as $250,000 here on the budget going in. We can reduce that by $70,000. It's about $180,000 that we would need then to fund the capital fund for the fire department. The last draft of this budget had that at $205,000. So essentially we found another $25,000 there. $25,000 there. Then we took a look at a needs assessment. I think I got a couple of quotes on a needs assessment. Let me find those notes. Yeah. So I reached out to CGR. They're the company that performed the needs assessment for Heinsberg when they did their public safety study. They estimated, and I sort of just asked for ballparks from these guys. They estimated $25,000 to $45,000 for a needs assessment for the fire department. I also reached out to MGT, which is the company formerly known as GovHR, which performed the wage analysis for the town a couple of years ago. They estimated $30,000 to $35,000. And Caitlin Filkins, whose father was emailing me separately. She was the one who brought the truck last time. She's on the call as well. He does some of this consulting work as well. He said, well, you could easily spend $30,000, but you could probably get something for 10. He seems to have some experience in these types of consults as well. He also offered that he could, help do some pro bono work. So for, kind of a bit of a range of services there. So for the budgetary purposes, we penciled in $25,000 in the fire department for a placeholder for fire department needs assessment. So those are the two major changes that we made here, was looking at the capital plan contributions as well as needs assessment.
I'm in favor of cheaper if it's quality, and he seems to have good bona fides.
Caitlin, go ahead.
Lori, Lori's hand was up from before. I just want to make sure I wasn't skipping ahead of her. As Josh mentioned, my dad did offer pro bono. He has a lot of experience with this, which is where I'm getting a lot of the information that I'm bringing to the table into Front Porch Forum. He's been the fire chief of several different fire stations throughout Maine. He also has connections with the Williston fire chief, as well as some other fire chiefs within Vermont. And he has offered pro bono services to at least start the process here of looking at the equipment that we have and the station, and understanding what the members have right now and how we can increase membership, how we can be the most efficient with our engines and so forth. And so if that's the route that y'all want to go, I mean, obviously he's my dad, so I'm very biased, but he is very qualified in taking a look at this stuff.
I do want to make it very clear, the reason we were able to reduce the contribution to that reserve so much is because for now we took engine number 1 off the capital plan. Had we not done that, we would not have been able to reduce it.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go back to needing to replace engine 1, we're going to have to catch up.
I think part of what makes that possible, and you guys can jump in, is that we'll have an additional 500 gallons of water on the rescue trucks. So that helps us meet the NFI, I mean, my insurance is NFI, not flood tonight fire, the National Fire Protection standards of how much water we need to have on the truck based on their analysis of the town.
If only we could schedule floods at the right time.
Right?
That'd be great.
Or very localized floods, not
Yeah.
any building burning, better burn.
Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to, well, guys, two things. I've talked to Doug, Patty, a few times on the phone. We've gone over stuff. I've looked at his credentials and we've gone over it. I think anything we can get out of him for free or reduced cost would be, it would be a huge asset to the town. Oh, I think my headphones just died. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so that'd be a huge asset. And I think we should definitely, at least preliminarily, we should follow up on that and try to make use of it. The other thing I would say is that making any decisions in the fire department based on our desire to get ISO ratings is kind of, penny wise, pound foolish. ISO ratings are kind of, they're not directly linked to insurance costs. Every insurance company uses them differently, and often the amount of money you're going to spend to get a rating will never be offset in the total premium differences in a town. So I think it's just caution against using ISO ratings to do any financial analysis or anything like that. Obviously, there's concerns about the safety of the town and all that, which are separate, harder to put a number on. But the finance side of it doesn't really check out.
Well, thanks for that input, Adam. I tend to agree with you, and I'm very much in favor of the cost, which is pro bono. If nothing else, Caitlin's father's assessment would help us hone in on where to go further. It would be direction for guidance. Caitlin, I got your message, so go ahead if you wanted to speak to the fire ratings.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure because I know some hands are still up. So I do want to comment on the amount of water, and I know that was a piece of the Front Porch Forum comment that went out from Josh, you in the fire department, but I can't find the specific statute that says that. I don't think that it is part of the National Fire regulations, and as Adam is saying, it is part of ISO, but it's a recommended rating that you would then be trying to get to, and it's not based on, if that's what we're talking about, it's not based on the amount of water that you can carry. It's based on the amount of water that you can output within a certain amount of time, and
Right.
that obviously depends on the different hoses and stuff.
Right.
It works out, you have to flow so much water for 20 minutes. From the time of the first official truck that arrives on the scene with the rescue fleet coming in. I do not know the actual place in the codes where it is listed out, but I can do some research.
But you've been able to translate that basically into an amount that we need to have
Yeah, that's-
on the trucks for that first 20, which is where the number that you gave
4,200
me-
gallons.
Right, that's where you got to that number from, what we put on front porch forum about the trucks and the gallonage.
And I know 10 years ago, when we were contemplating what to do with the new water tank, we looked at all of these figures and distances, various points in town to compute how much water we needed in the tank to meet those ratings. Bart?
And that was for like major structure fires, right? I mean, the previous chief was talking about how many gallons you needed, and it was the many thousands of gallons for major structure fires where you'd be shuttling back and forth, if I recall.
Yeah.
But the question for the uninitiated, including people listening or watching this, so if you say 4,200 gallons in 20 minutes, what does that mean for truck? How many trucks carrying how many gallons? What's that mean for truck number one, truck number two?
So right now we have our first attack pumper is engine 2 that carries 1,800 gallons. Our next truck out is engine 3, which has 2,000 or 38. And engine 1 is the third truck out with 1,000 gallons. So that actually gives us 4,800 gallons of water above what was figured out 7 to 10 years ago. And so if we drop that down by 500, we're still 4,300 gallons. And I can't tell you the actual formula of the new tank that we have on the hill, but you had to run so many gallons of water per minute for the square footage of the biggest building in your water, your hydrant area. And that's why they went with such a big tank up there.
There was
Yeah.
something about distance too, between
Yeah.
source and fire.
Right. And we do not have very good water supply outside of the village.
Right. Caitlin, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just caution us around talking about amount of gallons. I think it's a little confusing to folks that aren't extremely familiar with how it is actually rated. Because it's not about the amount of gallons that you're carrying. What you're doing is associating the amount of gallons to the amount that you think you can output based on how you're outputting it. And so there are other factors at play there. And I think we just need to be careful about how we're talking about that in getting the community buy-in of how many gallons we would need in assessing new trucks. And I think that, you know, if you're going to take my dad up on the pro bono services, that he is very well versed in this stuff too, and we'll be able to help look into that and make sure that we have the right amount of what we need in the town.
Caitlin, I apologize. What's your dad's name? I know somebody probably said, but I keep referring to him as Caitlin's dad.
His name is Doug Patey.
Patey, okay.
I just put it in the chat too.
Well, I'm only 20% of the board, but I think it would make sense to accept Doug's offer, if nothing else, that would get the ball rolling, get us off the ground. And if we do need further consulting, I think the stepping off point would be a much less dollar amount than these figures that were quoted. Bart?
So folks in the fire department, does this revision make sense to you as presented on the screen here today?
Are we looking for, I guess my question tonight is, are we going forward with this truck that we already have in the works to be purchased, and then looking at the truck to be replaced in 2031, 2036, and 2040? I think that's your next
Yes.
three big purchases.
So right now, this budget keeps the truck, the rescue truck with the water as budgeted and as paid for. What it removes is the money that would go in to grow the capital fund for engine 1. So it removes that. If after an analysis there was a discussion of like, oh, we do need an extra truck, then we would have to, after the drawing board next year, figure out, okay, does that mean we have to find a loan or a grant? But that's what this does, is it keeps the rest, but it removes engine 30, 31 year.
And it funds at least part of a needs assessment.
And it funds $25,000 towards the needs assessment, yes.
Okay. Caitlin, go ahead.
No, I know that Josh, you had looked into that contract and had mentioned that it would be a lot of money that we would lose in getting out of that, understandably. And I'm wondering if there's any other stipulations of that contract to be aware of here. We are still budgeting money towards this truck in the FY26 fiscal year. Is there a certain amount that needs to be paid each year that we need to budget for in this budget before we can make further assessment?
Johnny, you're saying,
We've already raised what we need for this rescue truck. We are putting some money into reserves and it's going to a few pieces of equipment next year. But as far as paying for the rescue truck, we've already raised it.
Well, we have the revenue. I think the question is how much have we actually paid and how much are we scheduled to pay?
Oh,
right, so we've paid 121,300 for the chassis. The full purchase price is 589.46, which is due when we take receipt of it, which is October of 27. Or is there a payment in the middle?
it'll be no, it's the chassis and then we'll take ownership of it sometime between August and September of fiscal year 27.
It's supposed to be scheduled October fiscal year 27.
Yeah.
So if I try to just restate that, so we put the money down, that money is out the door. And we have this window of a fairly long time from the first payment to the final payment and delivery.
Right.
And if that's 27, it's still a ways out.
So of the roughly 469 remaining, how much of that have we already funded?
You're saying that
121,300. We paid for the chassis, which saved us
No,
$15,000.
the 479 is what's remaining. You're saying
Oh, I
we
see.
have that in the reserve fund at this point.
And I'm not sure that's directly relevant to the question, because I think it was, how much have we paid out? We still owe that balance. But it is possible some decision is made to either take the truck or not take the truck in that intervening period of time. I don't think it's prudent to just throw away 121,000.
No.
So that seems unlikely, but there's not a decision that has to be made like next week, next
Right.
month, or potentially even next year,
Right.
because we don't hit the delivery date.
Yeah, so I think,
Oh, we do.
well,
October 27.
No,
Yeah.
because for every piece of
20.
equipment that's bought, we have to reimburse them 100% for
and
it.
I think I misspoke, because it's October 26th, so we take delivery of it fiscal year. I got.
Fiscal year 26.
Sorry,
Oh.
October 26th, I misspoke on that. So the way it works, as we dug into it a little bit more, the 121,300 was for the chassis. So we bought and owned the chassis. So if we canceled the contract, we would own this chassis, the truck. There's maybe some resale potential there, but I'm not sure how viable that is or how hard it would be to resell or return the chassis. And we're a little unclear there. We haven't gotten complete information back from Toyne. There might be a $15,000 fee on that chassis because we got a discount on it. I think partially because they knew we were going to buy the truck. We need to get some more clarification from Toyne. There also in the contract is a clause that says that Toyne is entitled to an amount not to exceed 10% of the total contract price. So that's $589,000. So they would be entitled to about $58,000. Regardless of expenses, and plus 100% of all expenses incurred by Toyne. So that's manufacturing, engineering, any unreturnable items that they purchase. So I think the further along we go, the more likely they are to incur those expenses. And so the cancellation fee would increase on that. Right now, it sounded like Toyne thought that we'd be around $69,000 for the cancellation fee. This is over and above the 121 for the chassis. This should be for the cancellation fee and the 10% or the 100% of those sunk costs.
Just to be
That
clear, we're
was
not buying a
included.
fire truck. We're buying this chassis, that body, this tank,
Right.
that pump, this equipment, that package. It's an a la carte truck.
Cafeteria plan, yeah.
Yeah, and Toyne is sort of like pulling all
Assembling
those
it.
pieces together and then, repackaging and selling, but yes, essentially.
I wonder, does Adam have any thoughts?
I don't know. Caitlin, go ahead.
I think that this is obviously a big question to ask of, do we need this truck? What are the financial implications if we don't take delivery on it? What can we do otherwise? And all I think that we should do right now is consider if there's any money in the budget line. It looked like, and again, I'm sorry if I'm not understanding this correctly, $10,000 was allocated there. If I'm looking at the capital budget plan for FY26, I don't know if that's changed since what I'm looking at. But if we could not have money in the budget for rescue truck 4 in FY26 and be able to push that out until we have more information, so we're not approving something that we're not ready to, fully have an opinion on, then that gives us time. It's not saying what we'll do in FY27, but it is giving us the ability to take it out of the budget for 26 until we have more conversation.
So, I think, I want to respect to the process that the fire department went through for this truck. They formed a committee of the firefighters to look at their existing trucks and how they respond to instances and what they really need on this rescue truck, and came to the board with, this is what we want to do. Went out for RFP on that. It's been in the capital plan for a couple of years. So I think there was a good process followed, and the more I understand about it from Jerry, it seems like it's going to be very nimble to respond to the car crashes. It'll be mostly able to respond to, or mostly used to respond to. It'll bring people, equipment, and water all in one load. And I personally don't see the reason to put close to $200,000 at risk of not getting anything in return after they've gone through a process to get us here. I think looking forward at engine 1 and other engines, I think, like if we can get some more eyes in the department, work with the chief and the assistant chief and the firefighters to say, what's our next purchase?
Yeah.
I think that to me, that would make more sense as a separate process to follow.
Let me also summarize that. We already made the decision a while ago. When did we sign a contract and make the first payment?
So that was,
We didn't make the
2
decision.
years
The
ago?
taxpayers made the decision based on our input.
I can't remember what year.
yeah, I'm looking, I have it written down. I just gotta find my notes on that. So the rescue truck, the select board approved the purchase at their September 5th, 2023 meeting. So a year and 4 months ago, 5 months
So
ago.
part of the point here is that we are well down the path of both planning and purchasing this vehicle, and I'm fine having conversations about it, but the train left the station in 2023. And do we want to try to turn it around now, which has significant implications?
Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of torn in this. I do think that there is an opportunity for the fire department to have one less truck if the apparatus are well thought out and staffing's all figured out and all that stuff, and the training is properly done and the trucks are outfitted correctly. I guess I have two kind of holdups that are intertwined. Is that, I think if we were having this conversation about reducing the fleet size, getting rid of a truck, what that rescue truck looks like might have been different. But obviously, we've already contracted for the truck without having that conversation, just simply because of the timeline. So I think those two things do go hand in hand, and we're kind of we're forcing our hand a little bit. I mean, I don't think it's tough to justify eliminating a truck to save money by canceling a contract and wasting 25% of that. I don't think we're kind of stuck there a little bit. So I guess I would say, moving forward, we need to keep this in mind if we do start talking about reducing the fleet size, which it seems like we're kind of doing by not funding the replacement of engine 1 in 2031. Seems very reasonable, but we need to be very clear about that. So when the next piece of equipment is spec'd out, it's spec'd out with the understanding that we will now have a fleet of 3 main vehicles instead of 4. I think that's very doable, but we need to plan ahead for that because we are giving up some functionality if we don't redesign the apparatus going forward based on that.
I look forward to the needs assessment.
Yes.
But so I guess my point is that if we are talking about eliminating engine 1 and we know that we are going to buy a truck in 2036, then we will. Engine 2 will get a lot more wear and tear on it. not that that's a bad thing. I mean, our trucks usually rust out. They don't wear out because of mileage, but it will get more wear and tear on it, and so it will need to be replaced. And so if we are going to eliminate a truck from that roster, we can't really kick the can down the road 3 years and figure out if that's a thing because of lead times and because of planning. We need to that decision needs to happen within the next year, and then we need to very clearly, firmly tell the fire department that so they can plan, not because they don't. I think whatever we come up with, they will make the best of it. The fire department's really good at that, but they need to know what that is so they can plan ahead. So we don't have, it kind of sounds, I get the sense that we were talking about, we'll talk about this in a year, 2 years after the process. And I think that this is one of the things that, because of the timelines and everything involved, we kind of need to sort of ASAP so that everyone involved can plan ahead. So I don't think we have years to figure this out.
Connie?
Yeah, I agree with what Adam says. We don't. My intent in restructuring the capital plan was really just to put a pin in engine number one, and what would that look like if we took it off? So rather than a full size engine, maybe a small pumper, or maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that's not quite how it works. So either we're doing it or we're not. I mean, so putting a pin in it is not doing it. If we don't decide we're going to do it, we might as well plan on not doing it, I guess is my point. Because if we have planned on doing it, and then we kind of plan on it, and then we have not enough money, and then we're constrained by our budget, and we're coming up at the last minute, and there's the same discussion about not spending the full amount of money, we're better off with less apparatus that is not constrained by these weird, this weird process and budgetary and timeline constraints that we can really, really plan on. So if we're going to plan on having 3 instead of 4, let's do it, and let's commit to designing those and building a department around that versus kind of half-ass talking about it and kicking the can down the road. I mean, if we're going to decide, I really like the fire department can optimize their operations to whatever apparatus and budget we give them. And so if we're really clear about it, they can optimize it well. If we're wishy-washy, they're not going to know where to go with it, and they're not going to be able to do a good job. So we can't really put a pin in it. We need to, I don't say we need to decide this second, but like this isn't like a next year thing. If we decide we're not going to fund it this year, we have decided that we're not going to have an engine one, in my mind, because we owe it to the fire department to give them a firm and permanent decision on that so they can make plans going forward.
Yeah, I'll let Connie finish then, Bart.
Yeah, so I'd like to finish what I was saying. By putting a pin in it, Adam, I am saying because we are looking at hiring a consultant to look at what the needs of the department are. That's the only thing I'm saying. And it's only for this fiscal year to reduce what we're putting in reserve. But what I was going to say after that was to back up what Bart was saying. Yes, a very large group of people put a lot of time and energy into researching this rescue truck. I look back through our records, it goes back as far as 2022 when it first entered the capital plan. And it was scheduled to happen in 2025 as we rebuilt our capital plan and tried to make it more friendly. They pushed it out to 2027. But this capital plan has been warned in 22, 23, 24, and 25, 2 weeks prior, is that correct? 2 weeks prior to the capital plan being laid out and discussed for anybody. I'm just sensitive because I did see on Front Porch Forum that somebody said we're being sneaky. And it's like, there's nothing sneaky about this. It's been in the capital plan for 4 years out there for everybody to see.
The only thing I was going to add, Adam, relevant to the history of this town and the fire department, if memory serves, the vast majority of our major capital purchases have been through bonds and bond votes.
Mm-hmm.
So we have shifted to a capital plan and capital reserves. But you'll note in the budget, we're still paying off previous purchases because we did not put aside capital reserves. And part of the point of that is there can also come a time in the future where we don't have enough money in reserve and we say, we're going to put it out to a bond vote. So in terms of preparing for purchases, there is always that approach to purchasing, which is bond votes. If you really need to buy something, it is possible to go to a bond vote and buy it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have really strong opinions one way or the other on the bonding versus capital, capital reserves and all that. I guess more my point is that we need to be very clear about why we're, I guess, quote unquote, putting a pin in it and what our real direction we're trying to find is, or trying to determine, like, because that would be not necessarily a bad shift for the fire department, but that would be a big shift. And so they need to plan ahead. So this kind of, we're going to figure it out. And even if that is, we don't know, we're going to hire a consultant, then we need to be clear about that. We just need to be really open and clear about we are potentially looking at getting rid of a truck or not. I don't like, I am in the fire department. I don't take it personally if we're getting rid of a truck. I understand there are constraints. I understand everything's evolving. I think that's great if we can move and roll with it. But I think that we need to be really clear about it. We need to tell them what we're thinking as a town, because there's more to just buying the truck than having the money for it. There's the total amount, capacity of all these trucks kind of creates a big Venn diagram, and we try to cover the most amount of incidents and scenes and scenarios possible. And so if you eliminate one, it's very possible to reshape that whole diagram, but you have to have a plan to do it. And the planning process is years and years and years, as we're all aware, with this truck going, getting kicked from 2022 to 2025, and then it takes 3 years to get. So just money aside, I think we just need to be clear about that we are considering getting rid of a truck. And if we get to the point where we have a decision one way or the other, we need to be clear about that. That's my only point.
From where I'm sitting, I'm not clear on any of this. That's why
Very fair.
The needs assessment, and I don't think it's us, the select board, telling the fire department what to do. My perception of the needs assessment is that it's collaborating with the fire department with expertise to say, what does it look like? And then, like, all of us together, including the select board, say, okay, based on this, how do we move forward?
Sure, that sounds reasonable. I just think we should set a very clear kind of, maybe not deadline, but an end date goal of when we're going to start having those conversations. Obviously not right now. We should say, in a year or 18 months, we expect to have some answers so we can kind of regroup going forward.
Yeah, I think potentially a next step would be to invite Doug to come and talk with the fire department, because we won't have the $25,000. Let's assume the budget passes. We won't have that to spend really till July 1st. So if we can do some preliminary work, see where we get with Doug and the chief and the assistant chief and the firefighters. And then we'll, if we need a needs assessment, maybe we say, hey, we got a good plan here, or we say we need a needs assessment, but the RFP might narrow a bit in scope, and then that money might come down. I think that would be really helpful to getting us to the RFP.
Doug might say, you should look at this, you don't need to worry about that. And if we do go to a needs assessment, it could be a lot more honed down and a lot less expensive. Caitlin, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to be clear that as we're talking through all this stuff, and I know that I have been the most vocal about questioning the specific truck that we're talking about. I am questioning this in a way, I hope that it's clear that I would like the fire department to be very successful. And when I hear that we're having a hard time recruiting people or keeping people on board, the way I think is let's look at the big picture and go back to square one and figure out how we can look at what we have and what we're doing and the things that we're investing in, the way that we're investing to best serve the department overall. So I love the idea of, let's give them a direction, because the last thing I want to do is create turmoil that would at all risk any volunteers, not wanting to be part of this process or feeling like the town is not supporting them. I hope that is not how this is coming across. And I think that, my dad could come up whenever we need him to get this started so that we can do it the right way and make sure that we're serving the town, but we're also really serving the fire department and making sure that we're doing it the right way.
Well, thank you, Caitlin. It sounds like everybody's in favor of accepting your dad's very gracious offer. So you, as Doug's agent, what would be the next step?
Yeah, he's ready. He's very excited to help us out here, and I hope that the fire department is open to having him come, because he certainly, his first concern is making sure that you all want his help as well. And in terms of coordinating, Josh, you and I can coordinate when it makes sense, or over email and phone. And Adam, I don't know if it makes sense for you to be involved as well, since you've talked to him and so forth. But he's ready to go. You tell me when, and we'll connect a time.
Okay, I'll step out of the middle and I'll have you and Doug and Josh coordinate that.
Sounds great.
And thank you. So what else on fire department, Bart?
That's where I was going to go.
Oh.
So what do we need to or want to modify? I think we took sort of a sidebar after my question to the fire department staff. What, if anything, do we need to change on this sheet here for the fire department to put it to bed?
You guys want to see any changes there, or is that good to go forward as is?
I think it's good. I just make the comment that everything is going up faster than we want it to. And next year, it may be a little different model.
Hopefully.
Where's the train?
Coming.
So many trains.
So is that, we're good with fire department then?
So a little off topic is the Maxim. I do.
Good, Harlan, come and take a look. Harlan, we voted last night that Harlan can, if he can get it running with brakes, drive it in the 4th of July parade, because
He's Grand Marshal.
he's been marshal, so. He came to us a couple weeks ago, Dennis and I asked.
With little to no cost. It's
Right.
part of the.
These spark plugs and oil.
Yeah, that we could, yeah, but we can't do like a $40,000 new motor or something,
No.
or.
If you guys need help with that, let me know.
There you go, yeah.
Even
You
if,
were-
even
you
if you
were
need
Harlan?
parts cheap.
There.
Park it under your garage.
Well, that's another story.
So we're welcome fire department?
Sure.
Okay,
Thanks, everyone.
so what's next? Let's go down your spreadsheet and see what's next.
Well, we could go a few ways, I guess, since we've been looking at changes and potential additions to the budget. Maybe we go to admin and talk about admin budget. And staffing.
Okay.
So for this budget, as I said, we
Thanks, guys. Have a great night.
Good night. We kept this, and my notes on the admin budget, sorry. Okay, so we kept that with flat staffing for the admin, which is essentially myself and then assistant to the town manager at 30 hours per week. When we first presented the budget, we were looking at, could we do an assistant town manager or deputy town manager and an administrative assistant? Quickly realized after a meeting or so that that was probably gonna be too much of an ask for this budget. But I would still like to make a case for taking the assistant to the town manager to an assistant town manager, increasing from 30 to 40 hours and a change on the pay grade. And that would be, Duncan's position, since we all know Duncan. Looking at one of the questions that Bard had at the last meeting was, okay, some of that is going to be reimbursed by FEMA because a lot of what he's doing right now is flood recovery and FEMA recovery. So Duncan put together some good charts as far as looking at his time, basically from the get-go of the July 23rd, 2023 flood through now. On average, he's worked 2.3 hours per week on FEMA related items since the July 2023 flood. And I started to look at that from January 1st, 2024 till now, because a lot of the admin work that he gets involved in doesn't really happen for a couple months after the flood. So it does go up slightly to 2.9, so almost 3 hours per week of additional time that he spends just on FEMA. That said, there are some spikes. There are some weeks where he's spending 10 hours, 15 hours, this week being one of them with some of the stuff we have to do for 24. So I think that would help to pay for part of that. You know, and as I've mentioned in previous meetings, this, you know, between just gonna sort of maybe touch on a few of the things that he's working on. Where is he at? Right now, he's got FEMA reports, FHWA reports, which are related to flooding for roads not covered by FEMA, insurance claims related to that, managing the larger park installations that came from the COVID money, managing town center maintenance as we continue to see increases from there, grant application opportunities as they arise, dealing with appropriations in the fall, traffic calming, ongoing IT upgrades, managing the recreation calendar, website management, phone system management, assists Connie with AP and payroll, assists committees with all of their meetings. And currently we have Lynn, who is also the administrative assistant right now on her plate. And her position is temporary until the end of June, and she knows that that's how we budgeted it. But right now she's working on all the biogrant applications, 2 emergency watershed protection projects. We're soon to get about 10 more of those. Assisting in some of the FEMA flood mitigation grant projects, doing minutes for water and sewer and select board. So there's certainly, I think, plenty of projects and continuing to be more soon to be a fire department needs assessment as we, in which, you know, we mostly fire department, but I use that as an example of that will take some of my time to get in and help and be part of that. So just the continual adding of project flood related or not, continues to, I see a demand for more administrative time. So, I guess to put a number on that, I'm gonna pop back here. So to increase the hours and change the classification would add 27,267 to the budget.
That's including ancillary employment costs.
Yeah, that would be like the total cost to add the 10 hours and change the classification of the position.
Culvert,
What size? It's like a 6
3 foot
3 foot, okay.
installed.
I mean, I don't know the culvert, but it's probably close, yeah.
You know, everybody be falling all over each other to speak.
Thoughts, comments?
I'm definitely impressed by how much work is piling up. I hear people say other towns are getting by with, you know, just a town manager. Well, Heinsberg are kind of our peer. They have a full-time assistant town manager. I forget her name, but and I've talked to her. She says her plate is entirely full. I
Well,
think that,
there are a lot of things in this equation.
Yeah.
You know, somebody could say, oh, well, you're getting by with what you've got now.
no, we're not.
Maybe, but what happens when staff are burned out and they leave? Then where are we? And how much more will it cost to get back up to where we are now?
Right. And one of the things that, you know, when we set floods aside, you know, we're Connie, do we have a flood plan for this year? Okay,
That's Keith's planning and zoning.
okay.
That's in
Um,
general.
We'll just
You know,
pencil in the same date
there's
together.
work that we would like, you know, the Duncan and the Lynn position to do if they didn't have these floods piling up and the endless search for grants and so forth. There's definitely work for them to do in non-flood years, which may not exist anymore, but
Well, I mean, if you look at managing the park installations of what we're trying to do there, managing the different traffic calming ideas that we always have. This building alone has lots that needs to be managed on a daily basis, not to mention the long-term projects. Pretty much every select board meeting you can go to and look at, oh, there's a new idea. Oh, there's a new project. Oh, there's something new we should try to manage and chase down.
Yeah.
You know, so having the extra hours would certainly be very useful. And once FEMA does go away, hopefully it goes away at some point here, we get paid and we're moving on. We will no doubt find projects that will continue to be needing to be done.
So if we build this in, what does it do to the town admin and total tax?
Sure. Okay.
43,000 over last year.
Yeah. Mhm. if you want to go to total tax, so this now has that position increased and it has the library in here. Just make sure that I had that in. So it has the library. The only two changes we made since we presented it earlier today is those two. So that takes us to 6.76 for the tax rate increase.
Easier to read on my.
Or should I make it bigger? Oh yeah, let me reformat that. That's kind of terrible to read.
And we were at 5.58.
Yes, after some changes we haven't gone over yet tonight, but yes, we were at, I don't read that from the memo. It was at 5.58. What's that?
That brought it up 1.3%.
Yeah, because it's 27 plus the 13, so it's like $40,000 addition between both of them.
And before we started this pairing and whacking, we were looking at like 11-12%.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first iteration of this was like 21%.
And what's the biggest
then-
change we've made? If a voter asks, how did we get it down this? Because we've been whittling so much stuff and like,
Well, so I mean, again, that first pass that we did in October, we sort of like if we could do whatever we wanted,
Yeah.
right? Like increase staffing here, add more things. So I think the biggest thing really to get from 21, I think there was a 10% that we presented. Was that November or December? A lot of that was, okay, what can we do to reconfigure staffing?
mhm,
Let's reconfigure the capital plan. I think those are the two biggest things. In that iteration, we actually looked at what if we reduced a police officer?
mhm.
And then we went to the flat staffing model in December and added the police officer back in, reduced the admin staffing, reduced the, those are the two major staffing ones. Continue to drill down into the reserve funds, work with Pete on, what could we save on contributions in
Right.
26 to his reserve fund based on projects that he has scheduled. So a lot of it's really been kind of reconfiguring the capital plan is really what we've been able to do to get this drilled down. We've also looked at realized savings from the police department to get a better look at use of unassigned funds.
Right.
We projected that in this iteration, we projected a savings for January as well. So we sort of prorated the full amount that we had from the first 6
Right.
months. We also got a projection in our grand list from the assessor.
That we went up a bit.
So it went up a little bit, so that helped by like maybe a percentage point even. I'd have to look back
Yeah,
exactly.
I just remember it wasn't too long ago that we were still desperately trying to get into single digits.
Yeah, the meeting right before Thanksgiving, we were still trying to scramble to do that. So, there's been a lot of work in.
Yeah, I just didn't realize, maybe it's because I was off in Key West killing my brain cells.
Yeah.
But I did not realize we had gotten it down that far. I just want to say well done to the staff who've worked on this.
And again, this has sticker shock. I'm not minimizing that, but we're spending less money in
Right.
this budget than we are.
Yeah, we're spending less, but things cost more.
So, right, so this is actually about 1% less in expenses from 26 from 25. So we were about 4.915 million in 25. This budget calls for 4.869. So again, a lot of this goes back to, if you look at the revenue, and I know we said it before, but just to reiterate,
Because last year was artificially low.
well, yeah, so we used $433,000 from unassigned funds because we had that much surplus. This year, with the July flood, that's really handcuffed us.
We've got to respond. If we're crazy lucky and we don't have a debilitating flood this year, and the FEMA money does come in, we've got to remind everybody, ourselves, voters, everybody, that we cannot just say, oh, well, let's just lower the tax rate because we promised ourselves we're going to put that back into the reserves.
We're gonna have to.
We have to.
Yeah, especially for the two highway reserves. So as you look at what we did in unassigned funds, a large portion of this is taking the bridge and culvert was the full amount of bridge and culvert reserve and full amount of special project reserve and putting that towards the flood expenses. That really is what helps us free up the unassigned fund. So we need to replenish that because there are projects planned for bridge and culvert and special project reserve that is essentially the ARPA money. And right now, the pickleball court is not in that pot of money. That was, we took that out before, but any other large projects that come, we need to replenish that before we can go spend on the next large project. And then after that, as we mentioned, that we really want to the reserve funds to say, well, what can we change or contribute to less now and maybe make up for going down the road? You know, this is that list here of funds that we've looked at. So there's, what do we have there? 7 different reserve funds. So highway capital reserve, we would need to reimburse to get back to our next project. And it actually goes to a negative balance in FY29. Police capital reserve, library, fire safety. Although I think we can get through some of those without FEMA, as I've noted here, but the 3 big ones are bridge and culvert reserve, special projects, and highway capital reserve that will need to be reimbursed with that FEMA money when it comes in. And right now, our estimate is about $1.4 million coming back. We'll probably, hopefully we'll start to see that this coming summer and fall as we get through projects. And that's 75% of the hard costs. There'll definitely be more to reimburse for the highway staff time, which is not factored into this because that's sort of cost that we've just incurred without having invoices that directly relate to that. So we might get a little more than 1.4 million, but the timing's always funky. You know, we may not get all of that by this fall. We certainly would hope that we get most of it though.
And it's still not legal for us to do a 50-50 raffle.
I think we can do any raffle we want, calendars and stuff as well.
What month do you know?
Well,
September.
to be fully transparent, you also put in the funds remaining after reserve reimbursements. So it's possible we'll end up with some additional FEMA revenue that isn't replacing a reserve.
Oh, boy.
Right. So
That's what that figure says.
that's what this
It
is here.
is.
Yeah.
But I do want to point out a couple of things about the unassigned funds. So right now we have us at 6.76. Pete's still waiting on some invoices,
You still have,
which could eliminate the 78,000 that we're seeing in there, which would bring us to 8.73. The other thing is, yes, our policy says 15% of reserves, and part of why we're able to do this is by emptying the 2 reserves. It lowers how much of that 15% we need. And I don't know if that's, I don't know about that. Technically, those
math,
reserves
yeah.
really should.
well, it's not 50% of the reserves, it's 15% of the budget.
Yeah.
15% of the budget.
What effect would it have on the tax rate if we drained the tennis reserve?
Yeah, $300.
Go, Jay.
We've done it.
Every tax.
We've done it.
But yeah,
It is about $300 that we're never gonna spend.
15% of the budget, so
Yeah.
it's not of the reserves, it's 50% of. the
Okay, that's a
budget.
cash flow thing. Never
Yeah,
mind.
sorry.
Too
So,
many projects.
so yeah, I mean, you know, if we finalize this budget and we end up having more FEMA expenses, which we might, you know, what will happen there essentially is we would dip below that 15%, which is not ideal, but it wouldn't have been planned with the information that we have at the time we finalized the budget.
Do we know what neighboring towns' budgets are going to be?
I don't really know.
From Bolton, and we are looking at a double-digit increase.
Yeah, you guys,
We're hammered.
It's whacked.
The flood was twice what the budget was.
I don't
and
know where,
your grand list is considerably lower, right? Yeah.
you know, I don't know where towns finalized. I do know that I was interviewed by a reporter for Vermont Digger. I think it was beginning of December timeframe. And the premise of his story was that he was hearing that a lot of towns were facing budget challenges this year and were trying to continue to work on their budget. So I don't know where towns have ended up at this point. That I'm sure most of them have done the same work that we've done over the last 6 weeks. But from what it sounds like, through various reasons, flooding or other reasons for towns this year, it seems to be particularly challenging for a number of Vermont towns.
Sorry?
I think Montpelier is eliminating positions.
Yeah.
Barry is eliminating positions. I mean, and partly because they otherwise are looking at increases in double digits.
Well, Barry realizes how many votes, I keep confusing whether it was Barry Town. was that Berry Town or Berry City?
Berry City.
Okay, so is Berry City the one that's limiting positions?
Yes.
Okay, because they know if it took them 4 budgets to get things passed, I'll spare the speech.
And Berry City's infrastructure is just crumbling, bridges, roads, water, sewer. They've got a water main break every other day.
Can't they sell off that statue of the big guy with the sword? No, in all seriousness, I think we seem to be doing a lot better than Pete's got his hand up. I'll shut up.
Go ahead, Pete.
It's okay. That's okay, Jay. Just throwing this out there. Every year I bring this up, has anybody got any idea what the school budgets are looking like this year? MMU budget, do we have any rough idea of a percentage for them?
I've heard they're going up substantially because of health insurance increases, but I don't know. Josh might know more.
He's got a relative on the school.
I mean, despite the fact that my wife is on the school board, I don't know a ton about where they're at with their budget, other than they're facing significant challenges with the funding model that comes through the state. So even if, from what I understand is even if they keep it fairly flat, there could still be an increase. At least I knew that's what happened last year. So I think it's always a challenge, particularly with the changes to the state model.
Yeah, just this year being as critical as it is for all the towns with these major flood expenses, we got to look at all the parts that make up our taxes, and school is the biggest one. So I got to think they're feeling a lot of pressure on really trying to do what we're doing, is cut reserves, do whatever we can, you go in bare bones minimum to try to keep costs down for everyone. I'm hoping that the school board is doing the same thing towns are doing.
I think the hard part for the school board is that so much of it, with the way it's funded through the state, is unfortunately out of their hands.
Yeah, that's unlikely. Okay.
But I think they're trying to do as much work as they can.
Yeah.
But once they sort of take their number and give it to the state, it turns back a tax rate increase that they don't like, kind of no matter what they give the state. And I don't understand it that well, but that seems to be the case.
All right.
If I'm reading the Heinsberg documents correctly, their general fund taxes are going up 7.96%, 26 over 25.
So in the ballpark.
It's a draft document.
Yeah,
That's with a reduction in the police force.
that is with reduction, I think, in the police force, yeah.
And their total expenses are an increase of 0.81%.
Oh, they're actually increasing expenses.
Expenses are up 0.81%
Okay, so not
and
too much.
taxes are up 7.96%.
They must have had a non-tax revenue that fell off at some point there.
Including intergovernmental, that's us, and use of fund balances,
So there you go.
which is similar to us
Mhm.
ostensibly.
No, it was talking about the reserves, how that plays into it. If our cash dips below the total reserves, we have to take a loan. By eliminating
Reserves end up-
reserves,
yeah.
we've reduced how much
But we're,
cash.
I don't think we're in danger of that, because by keeping 15,
Hopefully the bills will stop coming. Well, I mean, the bills have stopped coming, but they're still out there.
let's see, other things that, just to kind of lower back to my notes, we haven't necessarily touched on, just to sort of maybe talk through a couple other things that are fairly minor as we contemplate where we're going to end up here. At the last iteration, we had the passive insurance, which is basically property, casualty, auto insurance, workers' comp.
That fire department thing.
Signed risk, which is basically workers' comp for the fire
Right,
department.
right.
So we had a total bill from them, but without a departmental allocation. For the last iteration of the budget, I kind of estimated it based on how they were allocated last year. They gave us a very detailed, so than ever, department allocation this year. They actually broke some costs up that hadn't been broken up before. So took a deep dive on that, allocated it across all departments. The bottom line was it only actually increased the budget by $390 overall. So I think we were pretty close with department allocations by estimate, but some of the departments went up, some of the departments went down based on what my estimate was to that. Town center building insurance is always offset. This 1029 here is offset by revenue. So we made that change to make that match. I'm sure we had that lined up. The assessors, for the last couple of years, every year we receive a grant, this Act 60 reappraisal grant, usually about $15,000. For the last couple of years, because we were going through a reappraisal, we were taking the full amount of that and putting that into the reappraisal reserve. What we had done for the couple of years leading up to the reappraisal was we only put a portion of that into the reappraisal reserve, and the rest of it ended up going to the operating cost of assessing. So for this, we said, okay, well, what if we put 7,500 in the reserve and retained 7,500 to go kind of towards general revenue? For scope right now, at the end of FY25, we'll have about $60,000 in that reserve. The last reappraisal cost about $125,000. So, and that was just 2 years ago. So we've got a few years ahead of us to build that reserve back up. So that was one spot where I felt somewhat comfortable saying, all right, can we do anything more there? We talked about the grand list estimates. So those were just a couple other changes that I wanted to make sure that we noted.
Could you go to the budget amounts for voter approval line, sort of at the bottom above revenue?
This year?
Yeah. So we've had several comments in email and otherwise that this is a key part of the story, that your tax rate may go up, but the spending is
Down,
slightly down.
which is a real accomplishment considering the costs we cannot control, namely health insurance.
And so having tightened our belt in several places to get through this, and that is going to be a difficult thing to explain, that the budget amount is slightly less, but your taxes still go up.
But I think as far as, you use the phrase story, if we say this went up because we are committed to providing health insurance for our employees, if you set that increase aside, everything else, I mean, this is the net drop. That, the cost we can control, we are spending significantly less.
Yeah, the real story is the unobligated funds, that instead of rolling it over year to year, to me, that's the elevator story, the elevator speech. Instead of rolling it over year to year as we have, that money is gone. So even if you're about flat, you got to raise the tax rate to stay where you are.
Yeah, that'll definitely be part of the budget presentation, which we touched on last night. We'll probably want to do one end of January, early February, and another one with, I think statutorily we have to do one within 10 days of the vote, so it'll be end of February. But with early voting opening up in early February, I want to do one early so that people understand what they're voting on and we have a chance to explain it.
And probably have links to it in several places so people can watch it and see it.
Absolutely. I think communication is going to be key.
Yeah.
So are we not doing anything on the day of voting?
New business.
Well, yeah, we talked about that a bit last night. So we're gonna have, not a lot. They'll be here and receive the town reports, but that's always like very quickly moved and approved. And then, any other business that comes before. So
And we have no idea because
we don't know what people might think of.
we've had, should the town of Richmond invade Palestine? Should we, or whatever that was.
We had the
I'm
flyover.
joking, but there was a lengthy discussion about Palestine. There was a discussion. We've had various citizen referenda that have taken hours to discuss.
Last year we probably spent at least half hour, 45 minutes on the housing and Brown's Court discussion.
Yeah.
Which was actually very, I think, helpful to the select board.
It was. I'm not
You could hear from
dismissing.
the-
Yeah.
But I agree with you. We don't know what, it's everything from national world politics to very local things to deal with Richmond.
We could talk about are the voters interested, and this is non-binding, but just a conversation. Are the voters interested in breaking the budget out into pieces like the library?
Yeah.
So I don't know if we're sort of landing here. It feels like maybe, do we want to do, I hate to suggest another meeting, but just knowing that we're sort of coming down to the wire, we might want to consider a meeting on Monday. We could go back finalize the budget to a more presentable form. We get rid of the salmon colors. And then on Monday, we can look at this. We can look at the town meeting warning as well, maybe look at some potential dates for information sessions.
Yeah.
So that we can come to a more finalized version of that warning, and either it's finalized that night, or maybe we finalize it then at the 21st meeting.
Well,
What's the name?
if we're gonna bring up another meeting, maybe we could also discuss the policy of how to allocate curb stops for new construction.
You want to talk about curb stops? I hope you're joking.
No, we discussed that thing 18 times.
Oh,
Finally
you're
voted.
talking, sorry, for water sewer, yes. You said curb stops, I immediately, for some reason, my mind went to like access permits, and I'm like, oh, no. But I don't want to talk about curb stops either. But maybe we look at next Monday.
What
to-
you're
to
missing
come
out
back
by not being.
for an hour, and
Put a stamp on it.
I think so, yeah, and really look at what are we gonna do here.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, Jay says the curb stops here, I guess. Something like that.
There you go, there you go.
Go ahead, Patty.
You didn't talk about the police budget. What's the deal with the police budget?
Yeah, so the police, but we didn't talk about that because at the last meeting, we looked at that as having 4 officers, shared chief with Heinsberg, and a 20-hour admin position, and we've kept that the same in this iteration of the budget. So that flat staffs the police to where they are at FY25, and I think gives us a good plan for the police going forward, at least budgetarily.
So we didn't talk about that or recreation trails, things where there were not.
Things where there were no
changes.
changes things that sort of stayed the same from the last presentation. We
Favorable
could talk about it if you wanted to, but I didn't go down that road because we had talked.
Well,
about
if there's
it last
interest
meeting.
in some of the people here tonight,
I'd like to just ask a question about that, if I could, Josh.
Yeah, sure.
I read in the Citizen this week that Heinsberg is not funding another half staff person for the police department. And you had already felt like they had already communicated that to you, that they weren't going to do that, correct?
So you're talking about an administrative position, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so our budget right now has a 20-hour administrative position with no assumption of revenue coming from Heinsberg to cover that position.
Okay, that's what I thought. So since we know now what we are working with, will we begin the process of hiring someone between, like before? We already have someone budgeted for that position now from this last budget. Are you intending to try to hire someone for this for January through June, and then June onward?
Yeah, because it as we've talked about before, a 20-hour position is currently in the FY25 budget. I've said before that we sort of, we had some delays on that, conversations with Heinsberg. Also, what's the future of our budget? But even after the last meeting, I gave a job description to the chief to review to make sure that that's what he wanted. And as soon as we finalize that, we'll get that job posted and hopefully hired ASAP.
So we could anticipate posting in the next week or two?
I would think so.
And does the position include website work management?
I'd have to look back at it. We'll get it. We will make sure we address the website postings for sure.
Like data going out facing data.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is like also getting that. I mean, posting on the website is the easy part.
Yeah.
It's getting the data out of the system. Once we have a report, it takes Duncan or me 5 minutes to post it.
right, but only an officer, not
Only-
a.
Right, so it
only
does
officer can get
include,
it.
well, I think that hopefully by having that, I think the admin can do some of it if they're certified in certain respects.
If they're certified, yeah.
But even just having the admin person there would then free up, I think, some more time that the chief or others are using right now to say, oh, now I have an extra hour to do admin work or to get the numbers. And, but I think we would, what we need to do right now is get the numbers that we have been getting more consistently and up online. I know there's a desire for much more in-depth numbers. And Jay, you and I have taken a lot of travels down that road to try to figure out that.
Right.
I think that's still a good aspirational goal, but I want to set realistic expectations that we're not going to get there quickly, because
Right.
as we uncover that, as one example, Burlington, I think, had at least one person that was sort of their full-time job.
It was their
Was
full-time
drilling
job.
into their data, and they've got a lot of data there as well.
Yeah.
So I think we will still strive for that. But
one thing that's really,
my first thing is I want to make sure we get the basic data, which we're not getting now, back up.
but that's the thing is, one of the things that's really handcuffing us about this is there's a gazillion data fields in the Valcor database, and they all sound sexy, like, oh, what's that one contain? And sometimes this field, which you think is the obvious field to contain this data, contains nothing. But this field over here, which has a weird name and you don't really know what it means, actually has the data that you were looking for from over here. And when I'm mining a database, I basically say, pull in everything. And then I go, that, and that are useful. I can't do that because I don't have the right. And so we're basically having to say, well, give us these fields. And 2 weeks later, they give us those. We go, well, that's not, it just really slows things down when you're having to ask somebody else multiple times what to get what you want.
And hopefully, I mean, potentially with an admin to help take some of that, a different chief that we're working with now, maybe some of that turnaround could be a little quicker, because I know that we were in a different place staffing wise when we were looking at that,
Right.
but with different personnel.
And the other thing that I personally, well, I've heard from citizens and I'd like it too, is the weekly police blotter, police log.
That's what I mean by covering the basics, is getting back
Yeah.
to making sure we're doing that. I think Anthony's doing it monthly, but at least getting that posted. And then we had some basic stats that we would do as far as calls. And that was, I think, a fairly simple report out of Valcor. It probably takes more time than I realized, but it wasn't really in depth. And it provided more detail, which is more than we're providing now, which is really done.
Focus.
And on the blotter, Chief did give me, I think, blotters up through the end of at least November, maybe December. So I've got all those posted online. We don't have the stats where I'd like them to be at this point, but I understand where we've also been dealing with some spikes in crime lately. And hopefully as we get more staffing, we can address that.
All right. Just one comment for anybody who's looking at the police budget. You'll see that the community outreach Howard Center has moved from the police budget to contracted social services.
Right, and that was a change we did last year as we tried to reallocate the appropriation requests, and community outreach is not necessarily an appropriation request. That's what we put under contracted social services, along with Special Services Transportation Agency and Wilson Community Justice Center, because those are a few that we essentially contract with and get a direct benefit from.
But if you looked at the police budget, you might be tempted to conclude, oh, you're not paying for that anymore. And we are, it's just moved.
It's just moved, correct. Yeah.
Patty, did you
Excuse
have
me. Yeah, I had a couple more questions. I wonder if I could just throw them out there too. One, just since you're on Howard, I was looking at the Heinsberg budget, and they have about as many people as we do, or maybe even a little bit more. I don't know. Their budget is $6,500. And honestly, I'm not very impressed. I'm not impressed at all with Howard. I don't know what they're doing. We've got an increase to them, and they have not really been satisfying in terms of answering any of our questions. So, I would throw out there that you might want to reduce that budget to the same as Heinsberg, because I thought that's what we were trying to do, to 6,500. Not that it's going to significantly affect our budget, but it kind of will send a message that, you need to work with us here.
Yeah, so I think that Heinsberg is under budgeting. Howard Center has gone through some changes where they lost some grant funding, so they've been having to reopen the contract with the communities that they contract with to ask for an increase, and some of the other communities are going up quite a bit more. The data that I saw that they presented was that they needed 25,000 between the two towns, between Heinsberg and Richmond. So I took half of that, so 12,500. I think our initial budget when the contract was just over 11,000, so it wasn't a huge increase. Patty, I share your concerns about the data. when I talk to the officers, they say that they're using the services and they find it to be very helpful. But and I've expressed as much to Scott from the Howard Center in a couple of different meetings that we need that data to be better and more timely and more Richmond specific, so we can see exactly what's happening with Richmond officers and calls to the Howard Center, as well as our citizens in Richmond, because we pay for this. Anybody can just call the Howard Center and call community outreach and get some mental health services, and it's a fairly low bar.
And it doesn't actually have to be mental health.
Oh, you're right. There's a number of things that they offer. Sorry, I'm just sort of generalizing there, but and I understand that they've had some challenges on their database end. It's similar to what Jay was touching on with Valcor. It has been a long time. I feel like that we're waiting on trying to get those things resolved. My thought on this is, okay, we do another year. If this time next year or by September of next year, we're still not satisfied, we might need to look at some other options. But I don't know exactly how you replace the service, because it's a good service and part of one of our initiatives from even pre-COVID.
And Patty,
Well, I know that the chief at our last public service, not public service, but our community safety forum, the chief had said that he is going to start keeping records of what they're doing, and he gave me a copy of the form. I'm hoping that we can at some point, maybe that's something that this new position would do, is go through all of those papers and collate them and we can get our own idea of what they're doing or not doing. I mean, that's great. The police are saying anecdotally, I'd like the data. And in terms of data, I know but we get bogged down on this Valcor website, but our group has done quite a bit of research with many of the other towns and cities around us to find out what kind of material, what kind of data is presenting. And a lot of the data that we want, that we would like to see, it doesn't have to come from Valcor. We're interested in things like training. We want that posted on the website. We would like to, the things that he's been posting on, the chief has been posting on Facebook to be posted on our website. And it sounds like, Josh, that's what you're doing now, and that's great to hear that. So, I mean, I think there's other things. We get bogged down in Valcor, and I don't think we need to. I think there's a lot that we can get, and there's only a few things that we really want from Valcor, honestly. There's like 3 things I think that we would like from Valcor. So I think we should have that conversation before we start saying, give us a ton of data. Here's what Winooski is being able to put out. Here's what Williston's been, here's what we've found. Can we do this, or can you call these police departments to find out how they get that information out to the public? That's just all I would have to say about any of that.
This always needs to be a select board conversation, that I think this merits a conversation with the police chief and have the police chief come up with a proposal. Because honestly, I'm not writing down the ideas here. I'm hoping that these are communicated directly to the chief, who comes up with a plan and then produces the data or says what he can and cannot do. Just like for highway, I wouldn't be in the weeds of like which roads are getting gravel planned at a certain time. So I think it's a really good question about what data can we collect and produce. But I think it's hard to have the conversation fruitfully without Anthony, and I think it's probably longer than 15 minutes at a select board meeting. I think it's really a dive into the weeds in a couple of meetings with the chief. And so, Josh, maybe that's something we can put on a future, just what the plan is, not the details of the data, but what's the plan to move forward with the data with the chief, and maybe have the chief come and say, here's my plan.
All right. What's next?
That was my highlights in the last 2 hours.
Curb stops.
Curb stops. You want to revisit that policy really badly, don't you?
Mhm.
Connie, go ahead.
Thanks so much. Checking in on something that you may have already decided on, but I know charitable organizations have been part of the budget in past. And I also know that they have been a discussion item at town meetings. Can you tell me how they will be handled for this year's budget?
Yes, we can.
Who wants to take that?
The town meeting warning is from last night's meeting.
Pull that up. That'll be helpful for the conversation.
So we talked about this last night, and so with the budget going to Australian ballot, there will be many things to vote on as the current warning and articles read. So I don't know if you can see that, it's on the next, it starts on the bottom of this page, yeah.
So it starts with
5.
Article 5, down through the end, basically Article.
Wow.
So those are all the individual requests that were received and forwarded to the voters for their consideration as separate articles. And if I understand it is possible to lump them all together, but it was a consideration that there's benefit for the voters to consider them individually. Do you want to vote for some of these, all of these, none of these? So that's how it's presented in the current town warning.
Thank you for going over that. That's helpful. That's just what I was looking for. Appreciate it.
Thank
And
you.
I also appreciate the work being done to support the police and Howard Mental Health and making sure that we're serving the community the way we intend to by looking for data. So thank you for doing that too.
Thank you. And this also goes out to Patty. I don't have any hard data to back this up, but I do know in talking with our last temporary chief and with Chief Cambridge that the collaboration with the Howard Center does free up a lot of officer time. They can turf things out to Howard to have them handled, which frees the officers up to do other duties. Bard?
I remember, David, I think we were both on the select board not that many years ago. There was a local agency that wanted our police to do a daily welfare check on a resident of Richmond. And it was like, geez, they're not going to do that. That's sort of what the local nonprofit agencies tend to do. But between that agency and the Howard Center, that would be a more rational use of appropriate resources to do welfare checks of whatever frequency on somebody.
I'd just like to add that is great, but it's great to have data so we know
Oh,
that that's what's happening. So I think that's the request.
Yeah.
And that's a fair request.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Anything else?
Good.
So meet on Monday?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful if you guys
Yeah.
can do that. I don't think it'll be too long. I think it's more putting a bow on it.
Yeah.
And what's our bow date for the town meeting warning?
Yeah, that could be finalized Monday, or it could be finalized at the meeting on the 21st, which will,
That's late? Okay.
yeah. Really, I mean, she needs it by the 24th, sort of like at the absolute latest. I'm not here the 23rd or the 24th, so if we could get 99% of the way there on Monday and then sort of like totally finalized on the 21st, then I can just hand it over to Linda on that Wednesday morning. And I think Monday, I think it doesn't have to be terribly long. It's going to be more like looking at things, and then we can, I think, get most of the stuff ready for the report that week. We might even be able to finalize the warning on Monday. I would think we
Awesome.
probably
Seems
could,
like, yeah.
unless there's a curveball that comes up in the next few days, which you never know.
Well, the thing about, do we want to use the new business time to discuss carving the budget up next year?
Mhm.
Can we just bring that up during new business, or do we want to put it on the warning as an article? I would say we should do it as an article to give, so people would be aware that it's being discussed.
Yeah, and I think we would want to do it as like a non-binding article.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
okay. And how did we do that? Actually, we had the Browns Court discussion as a non-binding article last year, didn't we? That wasn't just other business. I think it was, so we could probably do it similar to that. So if the board's interested, I can add that to the draft warning, and then we could also use Monday for other ideas of, are there things we should put on? It would be a non-binding article.
Okay.
On Monday, and then we could officially finalize and sign on Tuesday, the 21st.
There is that one little thing that Linda emailed us about today. Who should we
Oh,
dedicate
dedicated
the
to.
fall? And a little bird suggested a particular person. I don't know the best way. Do we want to have executive session to discuss that?
That's a tough one because I don't think it actually qualifies for executive session, but I understand the board's desire to keep that kind of a surprise from the person that might be getting that dedication. Honestly, I think in the past, it's sort of been conversations, emails, and then like sort of a consensus.
I don't think it qualifies as executive session either.
We could put it on the agenda for Monday and just talk about it in open session.
I think that's what
Sounds
we're
good.
sort of obligated to do, even though it's perhaps not ideal under the circumstances. So the follow-up to the previous discussion, last year we had advisory article 14, shall the town of Richmond investigate developing housing on the town-owned property of Browns Court? So we could do an advisory article that poses a question for discussion.
Okay, so we could do advisory articles for the warning, dedication, discussion, and final budget review.
Bart had also mentioned the other day, and I think it's a good idea that we commit some space to really explaining the difference between unassigned funds and reserves.
Well, I have a suggestion on that. Josh,
Send it all.
No, I'm waiting for a simple solution here.
have AI generate. I just sent
Yeah.
you two our town ethics policy rendered into a FAQ and then a quiz.
Okay.
And it's extremely easy to read, and it took 2 seconds for the thing to do. If we give it a 45-page document talking about with all the abstruse details about unassigned and assigned and
We'll
say,
lose them on the second sentence.
I know. So I say translate this into 9th grade reading level English, not more than 500 words, not more than 300 words, and you'll have your result back just like that.
Are you willing to do that?
It takes 2 seconds.
Right?
Just give me the source document that has the details.
Yeah, I don't know. Is there one source document on
I
that?
don't think so.
I mean, we can give it 10 source
I
documents.
do have the
Definitions.
summary that I've used in the town meeting presentation for the budget the past number of years that I think is fairly succinct.
Start with that.
You want to put that into the town report, you're saying?
Well,
That's your goal, the town report.
what my goal is people understand the difference. And
Sure.
so I think it's probably in a budget presentation and in a town report, like footnote or something, or preface.
But
And it was, again, my bias, that were a couple of examples, like for water sewer, to be clear, water sewer is not select board, not voted on by the town as a whole, but how that works. Libraries under the purview of the trustees, that there's some statement about that in that narrative section. And then this, my goal is, the broader goal, as I think about it, is to have the town report, to the degree that people are able and willing to pour through it, to be more explanatory about these things, where you don't have to already know something from some other meeting, that you could read it and.
do we have the unassigned? I just searched the phrase difference between unassigned, restricted and unassigned, and restricted and unassigned. The very first thing that came up was the town of Richmond's item from some agenda. It was listed as exhibit 2G3, so it was obviously something on the packet.
Select board meeting.
But do we have, I mean, apparently we were coming up with a policy, so that should be here on the policies page, right?
I mean, I think,
Yeah.
I think, Bart, everything you just said is usually in my budget presentation. I
Yeah,
think I can
agree.
pull those things out of there relatively quickly. I think they're already worded fairly clearly. put it into some sort of a budget guidance or budget information document.
Notes,
and
yeah.
Put that into the town report. And I think it wouldn't take a ton of time to do that. Because I think I've written most of it and done it already. So let me just,
So,
let me see what I can do to narrow that into something. And then if we need to go to AI, then great. And if I didn't already have succinct descriptions, I would say absolutely, let's do AI. But I think
Yeah, that
we
was
can-
from 2018.
I think we can accomplish this.
If there's a way that we can fit it, I would say put the explanation right under the revenue section at the bottom.
Yeah.
And put an asterisk right next to those lines where we're using, of course, this year's isn't gonna be that much.
But as we talk about unassigned reserves, library trustees, water sewer, like I've got all that in the budget presentation. I think if I do some sort of a introduction to the budget and it's not the full presentation, but it hits those highlights. And then maybe we have some asterisks like see budget notes or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, for more, because I think you're right. You like people are like, well, what's that? And if there's an asterisk, because anything with an asterisk, you can go back to the budget notes. Maybe there's a way to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, let me take a stab at that. I think we can probably have something to look at by next week.
and it doesn't have to be perfect. I was just thinking, because I
Yeah.
looked at last year's again and it was like, oh geez, if you didn't know this, you
Yeah.
wouldn't pick it up by reading the report.
And I think it's especially pertinent this year without having an in-person vote and time to explain, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's a good idea and I think it won't be too hard.
What we could do is get get it shortened, get it printed on some relatively big signs, and the five of us could stand at the intersection,
Mhm.
holding the signs up at rush hour.
Sure. We could actually stand at curb stops and hold those up at various curb stops and draw
Yeah.
attention to curb stops and water meters.
Absolutely.
Sequentially, so it'd be like Burma shave.
There you go. Wall drug ahead. Only 500 more miles.
Now, there is an explanation, I looked at the annual report and there is an explanation where the water budget is. But it's so tiny, I couldn't see
Yeah.
it with my reading
So-
glasses.
I think if we have a separate couple pages that we add in, and I'll talk, you know, I think that it's extremely doable.
And I was
and
thinking
helpful.
also on the each one has a narrative page, water, sewer and library, and have maybe an opening statement or closing statement that says this budget is under the authority of yada yada. Because you wouldn't pick it up by reading about the library or water sewer commission. It's sort of implicit, but not explicit.
Okay, let me see what I can draft for next week.
We good for tonight?
Motion to adjourn?
Lisa seconds.
All in favor of adjournment, please identify yourself and signify your vote. Lisa, aye.
Art, aye.
Jay, I, and Adam is still here.
Lisa,
Adam, I.
David, aye. We are adjourned at 9:03 PM. Thank you, everyone.
pretty good.
Night, everyone.
Night all.